Tony was with us, and your mom lost two babies while we were in Germany. And then when we got back, Chris was born. Not too long after that, we went to England, and we were there, supposed to be there for a 3-year assignment. It was a new concept they came up with, a composite wing, where you have three different kinds. You have fighter, reconnaissance, C-130s, transport, resupply, helicopters, all that under one commander. So you do the whole mission without, you didn't have to call the TAC commander, and then the site commander, and then the ATC commander to you get it all right there. Well, it lasted about a year, and everybody said, that's about like socialism. It don't work. So we went away from there, and as soon as they shut that down, we went to Seymour Johnson, which that was our home base for the 105s that were in his test wing. It was very interesting. It was one of the most enjoyable assignments I ever had because we didn't have a mission. We did a few live ordnance deliveries, but it was just, we didn't have to sit alert. We didn't go, we were just there. And as a matter of fact, we played golf every Wednesday and every Saturday. The whole squadron.
At Seymour Johnson?
No, this was at Eglin before we went back to Seymour Johnson.
Okay.
Go to Seymour Johnson, we had a mission. I mean, we had to go, we were on call to go anywhere in the world, over here, over there. But this was, like I say, it was just an easy thing because we didn't have, we weren't committed to anybody to go anywhere to start a war. So it was kind of fun. And we practiced a lot of golf. I got my golf handicap down to a 7. And I never had a lesson in my life. Anyway, but it was just a fun tour. And then it ended just as Chris was born. He was born there in Florida. And then he was an infant when we went back to Seymour Johnson.
Where I was born.
Yeah.
Before you took off to Vietnam.
Yeah. You were born while I was in Vietnam. About 5 days before I got back to Vietnam, you were born.
You went from the 100s to the 105s, and I always grew up thinking those were the #1 planes they used in Vietnam, right? I mean, wasn't that
105 was.
It was like a rocket. You were strapped in it. Tell me about the 105 and how you used that in the Vietnam War and why that was their go-to jet. And is that why you flew so many missions in Vietnam?
Well, the idea was, when I went to Vietnam, I left from Seymour Johnson Air Force Base as a whole squadron. We flew the 333rd over there. We didn't fly airplanes. The airplanes were already over there. I think our sister squadron, the 335th or 334, had taken them over and had been there 3 or 4 months. The concept of 100 missions was just starting to take hold. Up then, everybody had flown during a 3 or 4 month deployment, and then they'd leave if they had 30 missions or if they had 70 missions. It was just the end of that TDY tour for them. They go back. Well, we were the first squadron to go PCS. We no longer belong to Seymour Johnson. We belong to the wing at Tak Ly.
That was in Thailand. You were stationed in Thailand to fly into Vietnam.
Yeah. In Thailand, Vietnam, that was 6 months. I flew 125 missions in 6 months. And that wasn't flying near as much as I wanted to, because I wanted to fly every day and finish my missions and come home, which you could do. But then there was a whole bunch of us doing it. And then half the time the weather was real doggy, and you didn't want to go tooling around there with all those missiles and anti-aircraft down there, especially in bad weather. The only defense we had at that time against a surface-to-air missile was seeing it. Now later they got, when he's up looking at you, they had sensors that, oh, they paint you now. They paint you and you're looking at you. And once you see it, it's easy. You just go in, turn into it. He's coming at you, you just turn into it. And then as it gets a little bit closer, you just do a split S down off from under him. He can't make that turn. He just go ballistic and fall out of the sky. So it wasn't that big a deal, but they got more and more sophisticated. We got more and more sophisticated, and I was out over Haiphong Harbor. We had indications they were painting us, they were looking at us, and something just told me, we're going along, freight level too long. You gotta move. If you go too long, they can track you and they can figure out where you're gonna be. So I said, brake left, and got back out there, and I looked over at where we were, and you know, a lot of it is luck, a lot of it is talent, a lot of it is feeling. When you go to bomb your target, you know, you have all these parameters you plan for and practice for years and years and years, and everything's just right for you. You know, you get 45 degrees and 450 knots, and a certain altitude, you hit the bucket, and then your bomb's supposed to go real close to the target. So somebody said, well, what method do you use? I said, I use the Talar method. He said, what's that? I said, that looks about right. That looks about right, and let her go. And you'd be amazed how much all those trips to the range open over, you feel it when you're going down. If you're too shallow, you're too high, steep, and it's pretty good results. You can get them. You get where you know what you're doing, and you can ignore all the noise in the headset. We went on a C-135, and we stopped in Hawaii, spent the night there, slept on the ramp, basically. There's no quarters. We just refueling, crew rest, changing crews and everything. And then we got back on one again. We went to Takli, and we checked in there on the ground and basically relieved the 334th. They were TDY. We were now PCF. First squadron to ever go to Vietnam, PCS. Permanent Change Station. That was it. We no longer belonged to Seymour Johnson. We were now part of that wing in Vietnam, in Thailand. And 100 missions being North Vietnam. It did not count in country. We didn't fly any South Vietnam mission. We flew Laos and North Vietnam. Anyway, we got there, we checked in, we relieved the 334th, and we started flying, and that's when they said, okay, you got to fly 100 missions North Vietnam. You can't have it South Vietnam or Laos. But then about every third mission you would get would be to Laos. It's a no counter. You get shot at, but you don't get to count it. Of course, we were living in a hooch. There's at least 20 of us in that hooch. And there was an open bay, screens on the window, shutters that were let down in really bad weather, you know, keep them soaking your bed and all that stuff. And if you could find a toilet that worked, you were way ahead of the game. Sometimes we had hot water, sometimes we didn't. It was just getting cranked up. By the end of the war, this damn place was better than a base in Washington, D.C. Tok Lee was. When I was in Clark Air Force Base, I went back to Vietnam on a visit with General Burns just to see what was happening. From the time the war ended, we left, till I went back 15 years later, there wasn't any electrical wire in the facilities, wasn't any piping in it. They had stripped a very modern, new world base with housing, facilities, everything you can name. They stripped it of everything, and it was just a dump sitting there. The whole base. That's what the Thais had done to it. And their little Air Force was still operating out of hooch at the end, and they'd fly their little up and down around. It was horrible to see the amount of money. If you don't believe it, look at Afghanistan now. How many $1 billion worth of our stuff, top of the line, walked off and left.
Let me ask you a question. When you got there and you were in the hooches, and I've seen video of it, they're like just wooden tents, basically.
Yeah.
And with walking platforms, because ground was always muddy.
Sometimes the walking platforms would float.
So, tell me what a day-to-day operation looks like. Talk about when you were shot down in Vietnam.
Our commander, Scarface Jim Young, who was a smart guy, he figured out how we would do our scheduling. We had 5 flights, A flight, B flight, C flight, and we had them in, there would be 5 pilots in each flight. He worked it out so that had one flight was always on R&R, rest and relaxation, it was called. Anyway, most everybody went to Bangkok, spent 5 days. When you got back off R&R, you took the last mission of the day, 5 missions per squadron per day. You take the last mission of the day, and you'd be up all night or up till wee hours of the morning planning everybody else's mission, putting down maps here to here to here to here, and the distance time, all the stuff you need to do. And then you'd go home, go to bed, and then you'd take the 5th mission. The only way you get free one up to go on R&R is one to double up. So the next flight to go on R&R flew 2 missions, one early go and one first turn in the afternoon. And so that was the whole idea behind it. It worked like a champ. When you show up to go fly, you had no idea where you're going or what you're going to be doing until you see the flag and what the guys that just came off R&R, they had planned your mission for you during the night. So you get route maps, all your frequencies and your distance and time to the next, who your tanker was, what tanker route you'd be on, where you're going to Alpha or Bravo or L or whatever it is. If you were going somewhere way up north, that's just basically the way we ran the whole thing, and it worked like clockwork.
So when you were flying these F-105s, they were fast and they were heavy.
Boy.
And early on in Vietnam, what was the intelligence like so you could know where to go drop your load?
Well, but they didn't have SAMs when I first got there. They had AAA, but they didn't have any surface-to-air missiles. So it was a lot simpler than it got to be later on when they saturated the area with surface-to-air missiles, and it was the most heavily defended area in all aerial warfare anywhere in the world. Secretary of Defense Rusk later admitted that when we break out the flag, he had already told the embassy in Switzerland where the targets were. So that information could be released so there would be less civilian casualties. So tell me what a traitor is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Give target information. We lost 500 airplanes in that war, and this is some of the reason. Hell, they knew where we were going and what time we were going to be there. From our own Secretary of Defense.
Mm-hmm.
How stupid is that? But, you know, it's no different than it is today.
They don't have military prowess.
They don't have anything. They just do as they please. They don't seem to have any idea what they are. Anyway, yeah, the 105 was, I really loved it because, one, it was 2.5 times the speed of sound. It would carry more ordnance than a B-17 did in World War II. It was 52 feet long. It weighed 151,000 pounds when it was fully gassed, and it would outrun a Chevrolet. And it was a pretty airplane, sleek and, you know, very well designed. At its time, it was a thing to beat. It was a time to fly, I thought. You always had 1,000 rounds of 20 millimeter HEI, high explosive incendiary. You don't want to eat one of those things, I tell you what. And our standard load was 6 750-pound bombs. And it would still go supersonic.
That's shocking. So when you would fly out, would you come home empty every time you're dropping those?
Yeah, we had to drop them somewhere. We didn't want to come home and land with them, you know, get the fuses. You never know what's going on. After 2 hours, It was sitting on the center line, what it's doing to the arming wires and all that stuff. If we hadn't dropped them on a target, we had a place to drop them.
What about when you got shot down?
This was one of those non-counters. We were doing road reconnaissance, road recce in South Laos. Road recce, what you do is you have two people down low, opposite each other on either side of the road, way on out. I'm talking about a half mile apart. You can still see each other and see somebody coming up behind your buddy. And the other two were up high weight. And you just did this back and forth across the road, you know. You don't want to ride in a straight line very long. Even if you don't think there's any anti-aircraft stuff there, it can be there anytime. They can move in overnight, you don't know. So you always do that, some kind of defensive measure to keep from being a target. And we just come up from doing the low level part, we'd moved up and the other guys had moved down. And I got just about to, we were looking at about 6,000 to 8,000 feet. And an explosion, it blew my feet off the rudder pedals. It was so loud and so boom, just like a, you know, whether it'd been hit or whether something happened to the airplane. And all my gauges started going counterclockwise. The heat to the engine. In other words, I just lost my engine. And it only has one engine. So everything stops at that time as far as the mission is concerned. By then I was zoomed up as far as high as I could go. You can't go too high, you stall out. So you start a descent, and he said, try to restart. I said, I'm already trying that. You hit the gas and hit the fuel, hit the ignition. And by then my Jim Ware come up on my wing and he said, don't try it anymore. He said, you got burning pieces coming out of your tailpipe. There ain't no engine no more, ain't nothing gonna fly anymore. But I'm not flying, I'm gliding. I set up a glide about 250 knots, and I'm headed back to Thailand. We're on the other side of the Mekong River in southern Laos, and we called it Mayday, Mayday, you know, this kind of stuff. And they immediately launched a helicopter, but just to head in my direction. Still not knowing where it's going to come out. Ahead of me was nothing but jungle. All along the Mekong was rice paddies, one of the biggest rice producing areas in that part of the world. So I went this way and I got down to about 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 feet. Just said, okay, this is it. And I go out and I jump out at about 4,000 feet. And he shoots you out with a 37 millimeter anti-aircraft shell. Now, everything now is rocket seat. This was boom, like that. It doesn't shoot you out that way, it blows you out. And that's why I have a bad back till this minute. But anyway, you know, with all those years of training, going to parachute school and all that kind of stuff, I had in my mind, you don't want to hit the ground going backwards. Well, that's exactly what you want to do. But in my mind, I had it turned around. So I'd reach up here and cross my arms to get my chute to turn. You know, to come up and do like this. I did that till my arms were shaking, let it go, and it goes, you can go right back to where it was. So I resigned myself. I was going to hit on my back, which is the way I should have hit to start with. So, and I did hit the ground, ass and head. Got my chute up, everything up. And I'm in the middle of a big rice paddy area, and in it's dry season, which means there's no water in the rice paddy. They'd already harvested. So I'm sitting there and I get out my radio, which is carried right here. And I was talking to my flight leader, and I said, I'm okay, I'm down on the ground, I'm such and such. And he says, light a flare. Throw it down, puts out orange smoke. Man, they're up there circling. Then the damn flare started to fire, and it's dry as the damn bone. So I spent the next 2 minutes or so stomping out the fire that was around me screwed up my boots bad. I got it out, and then I started looking around. A gomer shows up, and I look out there, and there's one. And I look out there, and there's another one, and another one. So I reach and get my combat masterpiece, 38 pistol, and I'm gonna fight them off with that. And then it got to be 10 and 20. I put that thing up because I didn't want anybody to make me eat it. So I put that gun up and stayed on the radio, and I mean, by the time the helicopter got there, there must have been 150, 200 people. Looks like there was damn circus coming to town. They were everywhere watching this. Here's this GI down in the rice paddy. Anyway, they never made no move toward me, didn't do anything like that, but then the helicopter landed, and the guy sitting in the door with a 50 cal machine gun, because we don't know what the hell goes. That part of Thailand was very friendly in the daytime. At night, it belonged to the Pathat Lao. That's when all the skullduggery took place. Anyway, chopper came, and I had a dinghy, which is a boat behind me, and a lanyard with a survival pack on it, and my chute. I couldn't get on the plane that way. Somebody on the airplane cut my chute off, and that was the end of that, because everything else was tied to the chute. So if I gave it to those guys and said, "Hey, you have it," and they were all smiling. It was great. When we took off, it was in it. It took me to Nakhon Phanom, which we call Naked Fanny, as we would, and for debriefing. And I was there several hours, and got a ride on a Goonie bird back to Takli, C-47, Goonie bird, all the way back to Takli. And it took us an hour and 25 minutes, something like that. And I would do the same thing going in 15 minutes, taking off, going the same thing to a refueling track or something. You hear him go, I was already, adrenaline, it just wore me out by then.